You ever have that moment where your family sits you down and everything you thought was yours is suddenly not? Yeah, that happened to me. My parents sitting across from me in this fancy restaurant, telling me they're taking my inheritance to fund my sister's luxury wedding. I just nodded. But inside chaos, and here's the thing, you're not going to believe what happens next. So, before we dive in, I'm curious, where in the world are you all watching from today? Drop it in the comments. Okay, the last few months had been, honestly, the hardest of my life. Caring for grandma wasn't just about making meals or managing pills, it was this constant, gnawing exhaustion that seeped into your bones. Nights spent soothing her when she woke confused or frightened. Afternoons bending over laundry or shuffling her around the apartment. And the quiet weight of knowing she was slipping away. I was there for every lucid moment, every fleeting clarity, every whisper of her past. And yeah, my sister Vanessa visited twice, mostly to ask about grandma's jewelry or to show off her new fiance, who spent 20 minutes checking his watch like time was a nuisance. My parents. They were conveniently present when it came to meetings with lawyers, and otherwise, business consumed them. It felt like I was carrying the emotional and physical labor alone. They saw it as my duty, my hobby, something to nod at politely. My own life, my work as an archival researcher, the painstaking hours spent cataloging history, preserving the truth of lives long gone was considered small and unimportant. My days were quiet, meticulous, filled with the sort of patience and reverence my family didn't understand. I loved it, of course, but it had left its marks. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the reflection. Dark circles like bruises, hands trembling from fatigue, and yet beneath all that, a kind of steel had settled into my spine, forged by grief and by responsibility. That night, the exhaustion was more than physical. It was marrow deep, the kind that made every bone feel heavy and every thought a little slower, a little sharper at the edges. And then came the text from my mother, Victoria. Dinner at Le Jardin, 7 p.m. Sharp, don't be late. No hello? No. Are you holding up okay? Just a command, cold and precise, as though my very presence was another task to check off a list. I rubbed my temples, trying to push away the pounding headache, the lingering adrenaline from 6 months of caregiving, the silent anger simmering beneath the surface. I knew exactly why I was being summoned. Grandma had passed 3 weeks ago, and the air in my apartment, usually a refuge for my research, felt deafeningly quiet. I stared at a half-packed box of her journals, wondering how my life had come to this. I grabbed my purse and tucked a manila folder inside it, the one I had been keeping safe, containing instructions and notes Grandma had left for me during her lucid hours. I wasn't going to that dinner unarmed, not in the slightest. My parents called my life a hobby. They didn't see the late nights, the broken sleep, the careful tending to a fading mind. They saw only what was visible, what could be measured by social standards and bank accounts. Vanessa, my sister, the golden girl, was glowing, radiant with entitlement, already living the life my parents valued, a life I had been excluded from by my choices and by circumstance. They were all wrapped up in appearances, in superficialities, in the idea of a grand wedding that would, in their minds, justify every neglectful action. Meanwhile, I had spent months learning patience, resilience, empathy, the kind of skills you can't flaunt at a dinner table, but that shape every decision you make. I knew what I had to do. I checked the folder one last time, feeling the reassuring weight of Grandma's instructions, the subtle hint that I was not powerless. I took a deep breath, feeling the familiar tension coil in my stomach. This was more than a family dinner. It was a battlefield, and I had been preparing for this quietly, methodically, while everyone else had been oblivious to the real work, the invisible labor that keeps a family alive in ways no one else notices. As I stepped out, the rain tapping against the windows of my apartment, I thought of the contrast between their lives and mine. They measured value in appearances and social currency. I had been measuring it in love, duty, and the preservation of truth. And now, the moment to confront that imbalance had arrived. My hands tightened around the purse strap, my heart racing, and a strange calm settled over me. I was exhausted. Yes, but also ready. Ready to face them, ready to defend what was mine, ready to see exactly how far their arrogance would go. And somewhere deep inside, I knew that no matter what happened at that restaurant, everything was about to change. The quiet of my apartment, the weight of the journals, the months of care they had all led to this precise moment. And the thought, though tense and heavy, carried a sharp edge of anticipation. I wasn't going in just to sit quietly. I was going in to observe, to measure, to understand. The storm was coming, and I was finally prepared. I arrived at Le Jardin a little early, but of course, they were already there. The restaurant had that oppressive elegance, the kind where the lighting is low, almost theatrical, and every table arrangement makes you aware of yourself. Menus with no prices, staff moving silently, eyes always watching, like we were all on display. Ewan swirled a glass of red wine, looking bored. The kind of boredom that felt like a performance. Victoria, my mother, was adjusting her napkin with careful precision, her face the perfect mask of polite disdain. And Vanessa, glowing, radiant, like she owned the air around her, the engagement ring catching the light like a tiny sun. I pulled out my chair, the scrape against the floor too loud in the quiet room. Victoria glanced at me. "You look tired, Margaret," she said. Not a question, more an observation. "I hope you're not going to be gloomy tonight. We have happy news." I put my purse down, the folder inside pressing against my leg, a comforting weight. "I'm fine." "Mother." "Just adjusting," I said. Vanessa leaned forward, an impish smile on her face. "Well, adjust faster," she chirped, sipping her champagne. "We have a schedule." I surveyed the table. They looked like a perfect family portrait, polished and successful. But I knew the cracks, the hidden rot beneath the surface. Appetizers arrived, tiny, sculpted seafood pieces that seemed too precious to touch. I picked at mine, stomach knotted, heart racing, yet my eyes were sharp, observing. This was my skill. Gather the data before acting. Ewan wiped his mouth. "We've been looking at the finances. Margaret, the estate." I froze, spine stiffening. "The will hasn't been probated yet. Dad, Uncle Julian is the executor. We haven't even had the reading." Victoria waved a diamond-clad hand dismissively. "He's practically senile. We've been helping him streamline things, and we've come to a decision as a family. A decision." My voice stayed steady, but my heart raced. Vanessa leaned forward, eyes sparkling with excitement. "About the wedding. Pierre and I need the villa in Lake Chemo. It's essential. The only place that fits the aesthetic." I blinked. "That sounds expensive. I thought you were on a budget." Vanessa's smile was beatific. Empty. But Mom and Dad explained that Grandma left a significant amount in savings. Liquid cash. About $300,000. My blood ran cold. Grandma's freedom fund, the money she had hidden away for me, for my research, my life, so I would never answer to anyone. "That money," I said slowly, "was intended for specific purposes. Family purposes." Ewan boomed. "And right now, the priority is Vanessa's wedding, the social event of the season. The networking opportunities alone will pay for it." "So you're taking Grandma's life savings," I whispered, incredulous. Vanessa's eyes flickered with defensiveness. It's my wedding, my future, and what were you going to do with it? Maggie, buy dusty books. Hide in that dark apartment. Victoria cut in, dripping condescension. Let's be realistic. You're 29, single, your job is, well, a hobby. Vanessa is building a life. Grandma would have wanted her money to go where it would do the most good. My chest tightened. Grandma despised Pierre, I said. Silence. Ewan's face darkened to a shade I hadn't seen since childhood. That is enough, he hissed. We are the parents. We decide how family resources are allocated. Since you aren't doing anything important, we figured you wouldn't mind making this sacrifice for your sister. I looked at Vanessa. She shrugged, sipping champagne, completely comfortable with their choice. My anger simmered beneath an icy calm. They assumed I would nod, cry, accept scraps. They assumed I was just the nursemaid, oblivious to the fact that I had organized Grandma's filing cabinet, read every document she signed, understood the full scope of her mind before it faded. Ewan leaned back. We've put down deposits, Victoria added casually. Non-refundable, of course, so don't cause a scene. I smiled coldly. I wouldn't dream of causing a scene. Mother, I just want to make sure everyone is here for the announcement. Ewan looked confused. Everyone is here. Not quite, I said, glancing toward the entrance. The weight of the past 3 years pressed down on me. My parents were devastated on Facebook when Grandma got sick, but absent in reality. Ewan couldn't handle the house, the smell of medicine and old age. Victoria claimed it was too traumatic for her constitution. I moved out, paused my PhD research, became a ghost in my own life to anchor hers. I washed her hair, read her favorite mysteries until my voice was hoarse, managed the doctors, pills, panic attacks. In lucid moments, she confided in me, revealing Vanessa's greed, Ewan's incompetence, Victoria's vanity. She called them vultures. Now, sitting across from them, I saw exactly what she meant. Vanessa was a symptom. Victoria, the real villain. She curated life like a museum exhibit. Everything perfect and expensive. Everything designed to impress. Her eyes on me were pity. On Vanessa, pride. You know, Victoria said, breaking the silence. Since you save on rent living in that studio, maybe you could contribute to the floral budget. The hydrangeas Pierre wants are flown in from Holland. I shook my head quietly. I'm not contributing a cent. Don't be selfish, Ewan snapped. You're part of this family. Am I? I asked. Feels like I'm just the bank. Vanessa rolled her eyes. You're just jealous because I'm getting married and you're... well, you... The revelation hit me then, like a punch to the gut. They were taking Grandma's money to fund a wedding built on lies, appearances, and entitlement. Every subtle barb, every condescending comment, every dismissive glance led to this moment. It was worse than grief. It was betrayal wrapped in a smile. And I knew the storm had only just begun. The tension in the restaurant was thick enough to cut with a knife. Every movement calculated, every sip of wine a performance. And then the door opened and Uncle Julian stepped in. He wasn't just any family member showing up late. He was a retired forensic accountant, a man whose eyes seemed capable of dissecting a balance sheet through steel. He wore a suit decades out of style, pressed to perfection, every crease intentional. His presence shifted the room immediately, the casual arrogance of my parents, the gleaming entitlement of Vanessa, all faltered under his quiet authority. Julian didn't sit. He just stood at the head of the table, a looming figure, a living totem of judgment. My parents stiffened visibly, and I felt that tiny thrill of anticipation, the knowledge that the balance of power was about to change. "We weren't expecting you," Victoria squeaked, voice betraying her usual control. Julian's expression remained unreadable. "I gathered," he said softly, but every syllable carried weight. "Margaret texted me. She said you were discussing the disposition of my sister's savings." My chest tightened. Here it comes. I thought, every nerve alert. Victoria tried to regain composure. "Well, as a family, we decided it's best to use it for Vanessa's wedding. It's what Mother would have wanted." Julian's gaze was cold, piercing, landing on Victoria. He didn't blink, didn't flinch. Then he turned to me. I gave a small nod. That nod was all he needed. He set the battered leather briefcase on the table, the sound of its latches snapping open, echoing like a gavel in the room. Silence fell. "That is fascinating," he said, pulling out a thick document bound in blue paper. "Because, according to the legal structure of the estate, which I administer, there is absolutely no savings for you to discuss." My parents' faces froze. Ewan whispered, "What do you mean?" Julian slid the document toward him. "You saw bank statements?" "Yes, but you didn't see the trust?" "The Margaret E. Sterling Irrevocable Trust, established 4 years ago, funded entirely by the liquid assets you are currently trying to spend." I leaned back in my chair, heart hammering, feeling the tension in my chest shift. The trap had snapped shut, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. Julian continued, his voice dropping, deliberate. "There is a clause regarding misappropriation of perceived assets. Existing debts to the estate must be settled before any residual assets can be distributed." Vanessa's fork fell, clattering against the china. "Debts," she whispered, her voice trembling. I felt my pulse quicken. They owed money to the estate. Not just owed, it was a substantial amount, compounded by the years, and now they were completely exposed. Julian pulled a thinner folder from his briefcase. "I did some digging of my own," he said quietly, eyes scanning the table. "The family was desperate for this wedding because they haven't paid their mortgage in 6 months. They're drowning. They were hoping to leverage Grandma's savings to keep their house afloat." My stomach turned. They weren't just greedy, they were reckless. Manipulating Vanessa, using her as a pawn. Every manipulation, every lie, every calculated glance had a purpose, and they had underestimated me. I felt a surge of cold determination. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about justice, about exposing the truth. I glanced at Julian, silently coordinating. He knew the numbers, I knew the strategy, and together, we were a formidable force. I reached into my purse, pulling out Grandma's journals and the manila folder, a collection of meticulous notes and evidence, a testament to months of preparation. The folder was my armor. I could feel the weight of it grounding me, giving me clarity amid the emotional chaos. We began going over the numbers together, quietly, methodically. Each debt, each unpaid loan, each fraudulent signature began to unfold, revealing the pattern of deceit, the bridge loans, the falsified documents, the non-existent businesses. They were all there, chronicled in unforgiving detail. And then I saw it, the signature on the 2022 loan document. The handwriting was jagged, in a way my grandmother never wrote, inconsistent with the fluidity she maintained despite her Parkinson's tremor. My pulse quickened. I had proof. I knew it wasn't speculation, it was evidence, irrefutable and precise. Julian leaned in, scanning the document. "You think it's a forgery?" he asked, tone low. I nodded. "I don't think I know. I have her journals from that month. She couldn't even hold a pen that week. I was feeding her soup. She couldn't have signed this." His eyes widened slightly. "This changes everything. This isn't just debt. This is fraud." My heart thudded, but alongside it, a quiet satisfaction. We had the upper hand. The trap they set for me, the arrogance they wielded, was now exposed. They had miscalculated. We went through every document, every ledger, the proof mounting undeniable. And through it all, I remained calm. Every calculated glance, every subtle pause, every strategic movement in my mind was shaping the outcome. I wasn't just reacting, I was orchestrating. And with each revelation, I could feel the tension in my chest transforming from anxiety to focus. The power dynamic was shifting. My parents, once so confident, now flinched thought at every turn of the page, every reference to the trust, every note in the journals. They were unprepared for the meticulous, thorough reality we were presenting. The realization hit me for months. I had been patient, gathering evidence, learning, observing, and now it was time for it to matter. Julian summarized, his voice low but firm. Before any other distributions can occur, debts must be settled. That includes interest. They cannot touch a dime until this is resolved. I swallowed, trying to maintain composure. The room felt simultaneously smaller and lighter. Smaller because the space between truth and lies had become stark. Lighter because for the first time, I felt the momentum shift toward justice. The combination of Julian's authority and my detailed knowledge of Grandma's documents created an unstoppable synergy. Every instinct honed from years of archival research, the patience, the eye for detail, the insistence on accuracy was now a weapon. I watched my parents' faces, registering the shift from smug confidence to panic. Victoria's hands trembled. Ewan's jaw tightened. Vanessa's eyes darted nervously between us. The narrative they had built, the control they thought they had, evaporated under the scrutiny of facts, and with each passing second, I felt a surge of clarity. This wasn't merely a confrontation, it was validation. Years of meticulous work, careful observation, emotional endurance, all culminating in this moment where truth finally held dominion over deceit. Julian looked at me and said, quietly, almost rhetorically, "You started this, Margaret, but now we finish it." I nodded, a chill of satisfaction running down my spine. It wasn't over. Not yet. But for the first time, hope felt tangible, real. I realized then that the trap my parents thought they had set for me was now fully in my hands. I was armed not with anger, not with vengeance, but with evidence, preparation, and clarity. And the moment the realization hit, a calm certainty settled over me. The inheritance was protected, the debts were clear, the fraud undeniable. They had misjudged me completely. I could feel the narrative flipping, the power returning where it was rightfully due. Every strategy, every late night, every sacrifice, all of it mattered now. The trap had snapped shut, and finally, I could see a path forward, sharp, clear, and undeniable. The parents' plan to seize Grandma's savings had not only failed, but had left them exposed, vulnerable, and, most importantly, powerless. And I sat there, quietly, letting the truth wash over the table. My heart steady, my mind racing with possibilities, and a single thought threading through it all. We were ready, and they had no idea what was coming next. The next few days were a blur. Honestly, my phone didn't stop ringing. Texts from cousins I hadn't seen in years, all asking why I was being difficult, why I couldn't just let Vanessa have her wedding. But I was busy. I had work to do, evidence to verify. I took the morning off and met Dr. Aris at his lab. The place smelled of ink and paper, faintly of chemicals, but I didn't care. I laid the 2022 loan document in front of him. He squinted, adjusting the spectral comparator. "Clumsy attempt," he muttered, more to himself than me. I leaned in, heart racing. "See here," he said, adjusting the lens. The ink pressure, inconsistent. Your grandmother's writing, she had a certain rhythm, even with her tremor. This is uniform, drawn, not written. And look at the ink composition, ballpoint. She only ever used fountain pens. I felt a chill. That was it. Proof. I nodded. Exactly. She said it herself, you remember. Ballpoints are for savages. She never used them for legal documents. He confirmed, printing out a report. I'll stake my reputation on this. It's a definite forgery. I felt a strange calm wash over me. The gun was in my hand. Now I just needed the bullet. I drove to the bridal shop where Vanessa was having her final fitting. I shouldn't have gone, but I had to know if she was aware, if she was complicit, if she was, well, that would change things. If not, she was collateral damage, but she deserved the truth. The shop smelled of lavender and money, that artificial elegance Vanessa had always loved. She stood on a podium, draped in white silk and lace, looking like a princess in a bubble of her own making. Victoria fussed with the train. Both turned when the door chime rang. Victoria's face went pale. Vanessa's red. "Get out," she screamed, pointing at me with a gloved finger. "Get out of here. You've done enough damage." I walked closer. "I need to talk to you. Vanessa, alone." She froze, tears welling, but the defiance in her stance didn't leave immediately. I lowered my voice. "I have nothing to say to you," I asked. She spat words like venom, almost shaking. "Mom told me everything, how you tricked Grandma, how you're holding the money hostage because you're jealous." I paused. "Is that what she told you?" I stepped closer, careful, controlled. The shop assistant looked terrified, hovering near the racks. "You think I'm trying to ruin you?" "No, Vanessa. Your mom and dad are broke. They forged Grandma's signature on a loan last year, $60,000. They're using your wedding to get a bailout. They're gambling with you." Vanessa's face went pale. She stared at Victoria. For a brief moment, doubt flickered in her eyes. "Tell her it's not true, Mom," she whispered. Victoria straightened, trying to compose herself. "Of course it's not true. Your sister's confused. She's been grieving. You know how grief clouds judgment." I held up Dr. Eris's report. "You might want to see this first." Victoria didn't take it. She just stared. Shallow breaths, the color draining. Vanessa looked from the paper to her mother, then back at me. "Mom," she asked, voice small, "why do you look like that?" Victoria stammered. "It's complicated business matters. It's not complex." "It's a crime," I said, voice low, cutting through the hesitation. "They didn't just borrow money. They forged a legal document. That's fraud. Felony fraud." The silence stretched, almost unbearable. Vanessa's hoodie seemed suddenly inadequate for the chill in the room. And then the door opened. Pierre stepped in, and behind him, a man I recognized from society, Page's his father, Mr. Dubois. "We were told there's a problem with the venue deposit," he said, voice booming, commanding attention. Victoria froze. Pierre looked at Vanessa, confusion mixing with frustration. "Victoria, what's going on?" he asked, stepping off the podium. "There's a slight delay." Victoria lied, brittle, high-pitched, a banking error. She said. I looked at her, then at Vanessa, then at the man about to marry into a fraud. This was it, the point of no return. "It's not a banking error," I said, turning to Mr. Dubois, my voice steady, calm. "There are no funds. There never were." Silence. The shop, the soft velvet drapes, crystal chandeliers. It felt like a courtroom. Every sound magnified. Mr. Dubois turned slowly to Victoria. His face, usually jovial, had hardened. What did she say? She whispered. I repeated calmly. There's only debt. No funds. Everything is encumbered. He looked at Pierre, then back at Victoria. Voice dropping. Show me the books. Now. Victoria sputtered. We can't just call your husband. You have 30 minutes at your house. Bring all financial records. If not, my son walks away, and every bank in this city will know why. Pierre looked at Vanessa, who stood frozen, tears streaking the $10,000 silk dress. Get changed, he said, coldly. The drive to my parents' house was a blur, rain-slicked streets. Neon lights reflected off wet asphalt. Julian drove, silent but alert. You started it, Maggie, he said softly. Now we finish it, no mercy. I clutched the blue binder, repeating the words to myself, no mercy. Ewan was already there, pouring a drink. When we arrived, he froze. Victoria collapsed on the designer sofa. The usual staged perfection of their living room felt cold, empty. Mr. Dubois didn't ask questions. He commanded the room. Your daughter claims insolvency, that you're funding this wedding with stolen money. Convince me she's wrong. Ewan laughed, nervous, high-pitched. We are not broke. We have assets, liquidity. Show him the foreclosure notice, Julian said from the doorway. I placed it on the coffee table. The stark red letters seemed to burn a hole in the polished wood. Ewan didn't touch it. Clerical error, he stammered. My attorney, not an error, Mr. Dubois interrupted. You haven't paid your mortgage in 6 months. Sheriff will evict you in 30 days, Victoria shrieked, jumping to defend herself. We just need a bridge once the wedding happens, once the families unite. You were using us, Pierre said, stepping away from Vanessa. Your family was leveraging my name for loans, Vanessa cried. Reaching for him, I cut in. It's worse. They stole from the estate, from Grandma, forged documents while she was bedridden, while I was feeding her soup. Last year, $60,000. This is the forensic analysis. I laid Dr. Ayer's report and the spreadsheet of debts on the table. Ewan roared, stepping forward. Julian moved faster than a man of 70 should, positioning himself like a sentinel. Ewan froze, retreating. I kept my voice low, steady. The signature on that promissory note, forged, fraud, felony. The room went silent, only the ticking of the grandfather clock. Mr. Dubois scanned the forensic report, then dropped it as if it were filth. He stood, straightening his jacket. Pierre, we are leaving. Vanessa ran after him, sobbing, pleading. He paused, looking at her, then at my parents. You might not have known, he said quietly, but you're one of them, spending money, lying, deceiving. Engagement is off. Do not contact me. The door slammed, echoing like a gavel. Vanessa stood there, stunned, hands in the air, slowly realizing the truth. Victoria wept theatrically. Ewan stared at the floor. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of them, afraid. I turned to Julian. I'm giving him the evidence, I said calmly. He'll decide on charges, but the trust, they'll never see a dime. Grandma is finally safe. The fallout was swift. Within weeks, the house on Oak Street was sold at auction. Ewan and Victoria moved into a small rental, stripped of pretense, left to confront the consequences of their arrogance. Julian, in an act of measured mercy, allowed them to keep criminal charges at bay in exchange for a confession and repayment plan. And I finally exhaled, letting the tension drain, knowing that for the first time in months, truth and justice had prevailed. The bridal shop smelled of lavender and freshly pressed silk. Vanessa stood on the podium. wrapped in a gown that practically glowed under the store lights, while Victoria fussed over every inch of the train, as if perfection could erase guilt. The chime over the door rang. I stepped in. Both heads turned. Victoria went pale. Vanessa's face flushed red, a mixture of surprise and fury. "Get out!" Vanessa screamed, pointing at me. "You've done enough damage." I took a slow step forward. "Vanessa, I need to talk to you. Alone." Her eyes narrowed. "Alone," she said, voice trembling. I kept my tone calm, measured. "Yes, there's something you need to know." The shop assistant froze, glancing between us nervously. I pulled the folder from my purse, the blue binder, Dr. Eris's forensic report, the ledger, everything laid bare. "Mom and Dad forged Grandma's signature on a loan last year," I said. $60,000. "They used your wedding to try to secure a bailout." Vanessa blinked, disbelief washing over her face. She looked to Victoria. "Tell her it's not true." "Mom," she whispered. Victoria tried to straighten her posture, attempting a composed lie. "Of course it's not true. Your sister's grieving. She doesn't understand." I held up the forensic report. "You might want to look at this first." Victoria didn't touch it. She just stared. I let the silence stretch. Vanessa's eyes moved between the evidence and her mother. Fear flickered there, replacing certainty. "Mom," she asked softly. Her voice broke, the first crack in the polished facade. Victoria stammered. "It's complicated. Business matters, not complex." "It's a crime," I said calmly, the words deliberate, cutting through the tension. "Forgery, fraud, felony fraud." The air thickened. Vanessa's hands dropped to her sides, the delicate gloves now meaningless. Then the door opened again. Pierre entered, not alone. Behind him, a tall man in a sharply pressed suit stepped forward. Mr. Dubois, his presence commanding, eyes scanning the room like a judge. "We were told there's a problem with the venue deposit," he said, voice booming. Victoria froze. Pierre looked at Vanessa, then at me. "What's going on?" he asked, clearly annoyed. Victoria's voice hit a brittle high note. "There's a slight delay. Banking error." I looked directly at her, calm, controlled. "It's not an error. There are no funds. There never were. Everything is encumbered by debt." Silence. Absolute. The chandeliers glimmered. Velvet drapes seemed heavier. The ticking of a clock magnified. Mr. Dubois turned slowly to Victoria. His face, usually friendly, was now hard as granite. "Explain," he demanded. I repeated, steady, unshakable. "There is only debt, no funds. They have been attempting to use your family connection to access money illegally." Pierre's expression tightened. Victoria sputtered, trying to regain control. It's temporary. Once the wedding happens, the families unite, restructure." Pierre stepped back from Vanessa, his tone sharp. "You were using us. You leveraged my family name for loans." Vanessa gasped, tears spilling, reaching for him. I cut through it, calm but cold. "It's worse. They stole from the estate, forged documents while Grandma was bedridden, while I was caring for her, feeding her soup, holding her hand." Ewan stepped forward, face red, shaking. Julian moved into position silently, his presence enough to halt Ewan's advance. "Stay back," Julian said softly. Ewan froze. I continued, voice steady, unwavering. "This isn't conjecture. Look at the spreadsheet of debts, the forensic report on the signature. Last year, the promissory note was forged. Felony fraud. They took money that was never theirs." The room was still, the only sound a soft sob from Vanessa. "Mr." Dubois picked up the forensic report, scanned it, then set it down, the motion deliberate. like touching something tainted. He stood. "Pierre, we are leaving." Vanessa ran after him, sobbing, pleading, "Please, I love you." His arm didn't reach for her. He looked at my parents, then away. "You might not have known, but you're part of it. Engagement is off. Do not contact me." The door slammed. The echo filled the space. Vanessa, in the center of the shop, turned slowly to face her parents. Reality was sinking in. Victoria wept theatrically, voice high-pitched, shaking. Ewan stared at the floor, defeated, humiliated. For the first time, I felt no fear toward them. I turned to Julian. "He has the evidence. He'll decide on charges. The trust remains untouched. Grandma is safe." The chaos, the rage, the confrontation, it all unfolded like clockwork. Each piece aligning with the evidence we had prepared. I remained calm, controlled, observing, absorbing. The parents' desperation was palpable. They grasped at lies, at excuses, at appearances. But it was over. The law, the truth, the facts, all of it, aligned against them. And for the first time in weeks, I felt the weight lift. The storm of deceit and manipulation had met its reckoning. The bridal shop, with its gleaming silks and perfumed air, had become the stage of truth, and the performance had ended with justice. Undeniable, inarguable, and final. The fallout was immediate and brutal, without the promise of the Dubois connection. My parents' creditors moved fast, circling like sharks. Within 2 months, the house on Oak Street, the symbol of their vanity, their status was sold at auction. They moved into a modest 2-bedroom rental in a neighboring town, far from the country club life they had clung to. Julian, in a rare act of mercy, didn't press criminal charges regarding the forgery. But on one condition, they signed a full confession and agreed to a repayment plan, with a percentage of Ewan's pension going straight back into the estate until the debt was cleared. They had no choice. I didn't see them for a long time. I didn't want to. I didn't need to. But Vanessa, she was different. 3 weeks after what I had begun calling the Red Wedding, there was a knock on my apartment door. Late at night, rain falling in sheets. When I opened it, there she was. No designer clothes, no meticulously styled hair, just jeans, a hoodie, messy bun, looking exhausted, carrying a wet cardboard box. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. I stepped aside. She walked in, set the box down. It was full of her things. Pierre had sent them back. "He kept the ring, obviously," she said. Voice small, she looked around my cluttered apartment, books stacked in every corner, papers everywhere, the smell of tea and old paper filling the air. "It's nice here," she said quietly. "It's real. It's home." I smiled. "Do you want some tea?" She nodded, tears spilling over. "Maggie, I'm so sorry about everything I said. I was stupid. I wanted to be what Mom wanted me to be. I thought that's how you got love." I looked at her, my sister, the golden child, who had everything and then had nothing. And I realized she was a victim, too. Grandma had seen it. Vanessa was a bird in a gilded cage, trapped by expectations, taught to measure worth by appearances. I walked over, hugged her. She stiffened, then collapsed into me, sobbing. We stood in my tiny kitchen for a long time, letting the rain outside cover our tears. "You can stay here," I said. "Get back on your feet, but you have to get a real job, a proper one." She laughed through her tears, a watery, choked sound. "I think I'd like that. I'm tired of pretending." Months later, the trust was settled. Bad debts were cleared, assets released. I didn't buy a mansion or a sports car. I bought a small stone cottage on the edge of town with a garden that needed work and a north-facing room perfect for a library. I quit my firm job and started my own independent research consultancy, a space where I could work on my terms. On moving day, I unpacked the last box Grandma's journals. I placed them on the shelf next to a framed photo of her. I sank into my chair, looking out at the garden where I planned to plant hydrangeas, not the imported kind, but wild, hardy ones that could survive the winter. My phone buzzed. A message from Vanessa. She was working nights at a vet clinic, taking classes, and wanted to come for dinner. I'm making Grandma's lasagna. I promise not to burn it this time. She wrote. I smiled. A warmth spreading through me I hadn't felt in months. I had lost the parents I thought I needed, but I had found the sister I never truly knew. And, more importantly, I had found myself. Grandma was right. The money wasn't just currency, it was freedom. Freedom to live, to choose, to build a life on my terms. And as I sat there in the silence of my own home, paid for by the love and foresight of a woman who saw the truth, I felt richer than I ever could have imagined. I felt steady, safe, and finally at peace. And that's how it all unfolded. Betrayal, cunning, and ultimately reclaiming what was rightfully mine. I found my independence, reconnected with my sister, and learned that some battles are worth the fight. Life isn't about the money, it's about freedom, truth, and the people who truly see you. If this story captivated you, don't forget to like and subscribe to follow along for more real-life twists and lessons. I wonder what would you have done in my shoes?